In a small Yoruba village, Fatoumata defied death and returned to her loved ones, igniting hope in a time of darkness. But soon after her miraculous revival, a malevolent shadow began to creep into their lives, threatening to tear the community apart. As villagers whispered fears and doubts, Fatoumata felt the weight of her past resurface, demanding she confront the darkness both within and around her. Once upon a time, in the small village of Akolo, lived a kind woman named Fatoumata. She was known for her laughter and strong spirit. One bright morning, Fatoumata began to feel unwell. At first, she thought it was just a common cold, but soon, her body shook with a fever that made her sweat and tremble. The villagers became worried as days passed, and the local healer, Akimbaba, tried various remedies, but nothing worked. He mixed herbs and prayed, yet Fatoumata's condition only worsened. The villagers gathered in hushed tones, whispering their fears. What will happen to Fatoumata, they wondered, their hearts heavy with dread. Dembayaro, Fatoumata's husband, watched helplessly as the love of his life slipped away. His eyes filled with tears every time he looked at her frail form. He spent sleepless nights by her side, praying for her recovery. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, and the tension in the air thickened with despair. Finally, after a week of struggle, Akimbaba approached Dembayaro with a grave expression. "I am sorry, but she is not going to make it. We must prepare for the worst." Those words struck Dembayaro like a thunderbolt. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Fatoumata. With heavy hearts, the villagers began to prepare for her burial, despite the lingering hope that she might wake up. On the day of the funeral, the sun cast a pale light over the village. Villagers gathered to pay their respects, wrapped in sadness. They buried Fatoumata beneath a tall, ancient tree, a place that held many memories. Dembayaro placed a flower on her grave, feeling as though he was burying a part of himself. Little did they know, the real story was only beginning, and darkness was lurking just beneath the surface. After Fatoumata was buried, the village of Akolo fell into a heavy silence. Everyone mourned her loss, but deep inside, whispers of fear spread like wildfire. "What if she's not truly gone?" they muttered when they thought no one was listening. Dembayaro, devastated and heartbroken, could barely comprehend the void her absence left. He spent endless days wandering near the graveyard, staring at the spot where she lay, hoping for a sign that she was still with him, longing for a flicker of hope amidst his despair. As night fell, a cold wind swept through the village, chilling the bones of those who remained. The villagers lit candles, their flickering flames casting soft shadows on the ground, as they gathered to share stories about Fatoumata. They spoke of her kindness, her laughter, and the way she always brought joy to those around her. But just as they began to find comfort in their memories, a sinister presence crept into their midst, a group of grave robbers, lured by the darkness of desperation. "Let's dig her up. There might be something valuable," one of them hissed, greed sparkling in his eyes like a malevolent star. With crude tools in hand, they approached Fatoumata's grave, driven by hunger for riches rather than respect for the dead. The villagers were too caught up in their grief to notice, their hearts heavy with sorrow and loss. As the grave robbers unearthed the dirt, they soon spotted Fatoumata's beautiful ring glimmering in the moonlight. "This will fetch a good price," one of them exclaimed, excitement flooding his voice. But as they reached for it, an eerie silence enveloped the graveyard, foreshadowing the horror that awaited them. Little did they know that the darkness they sought to exploit was about to unleash its wrath. With greedy hands, the grave robbers struggled to remove the ring from Fatoumata's finger. "It stuck," one of them shouted, panic rising. The others pressed closer, their hearts racing with both fear and excitement. They knew they needed to act quickly. "We can't leave empty-handed. Let's cut off a finger," another grave robber insisted, desperation in his voice. Ignoring the morality of their actions, they pulled out a knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. Fatoumata lay still, her fate resting in the hands of these greedy men. As the knife sliced through flesh, an eerie silence fell over the graveyard. Suddenly, Fatoumata's eyes shot open wide, filled with confusion and fear. The grave robbers froze, hearts pounding in disbelief. The graveyard seemed to tremble as Fatoumata gasped for air, her body stirring from the depths of the grave. "What is happening?" one grave robber whispered, his face pale with shock. In a moment of sheer terror, they stumbled backward, dropping their tools as they screamed and ran into the night, leaving everything behind. Fatoumata sat up, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. She felt weak and disoriented but was inexplicably alive. Heart pounding, she climbed out of the grave, her surroundings dark and filled with shadows. She took a moment to gather herself, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. How could this be? What was she now? As Fatoumata stood up, the night felt alive with uncertainty. Her heart raced as she looked around the graveyard, memories flooding her mind. The ancient tree swayed gently in the wind, its branches casting eerie shadows. She felt a mix of emotions, confusion, fear, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude for her second chance at life. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Fatoumata slowly made her way back home, each step heavy with doubt. Her mind raced with thoughts of her family and the children she had left behind. Would they even recognize her? Would they be frightened? As she approached her house, the familiar sights felt strange and distant. She hesitated at the door, heart pounding. Inside, Dembayaro was tending to their children, unaware that Fatoumata had returned. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. With a trembling hand, she knocked softly on the door. Dembayaro froze, his heart aching at the sound. "If your mother were alive, I'd swear that was a knock," he murmured, brushing it off as a painful memory. But when he finally opened the door, his eyes widened in disbelief. There stood Fatoumata, alive but missing a finger. Dembayaro's heart raced as confusion flooded his mind. "Fatoumata. Is it really you?" he gasped, unable to process the miracle before him. "Yes, my love. I have returned," Fatoumata cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dembayaro rushed forward, enveloping her in his arms, feeling both joy and disbelief. But the moment of happiness was overshadowed by the shadows lurking outside, whispering of danger and uncertainty. Fatoumata's return sent shockwaves through the village of Okolo. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a blend of hope and fear among the villagers. They gathered in hushed clusters, their faces a mix of amazement and skepticism. "Is it truly a miracle, or is something dark at play?" they whispered among themselves, eyes darting around as they searched for answers to the unexplainable. Dembayaro held Fatoumata tightly, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. "How is this possible? You were buried," he exclaimed, disbelief etched on his face. Fatoumata looked into his eyes, her heart aching with love and uncertainty. "I don't know, Dembayaro. All I remember is darkness and then waking up in the grave," she replied, her voice trembling. The villagers watched from a distance, their hearts racing as Fatoumata took a hesitant step forward. Some approached with excitement, while others lingered back, fear gripping them like a vice. "You should be dead. This isn't right," a woman shouted, panic bleeding through her words. Fatoumata felt a wave of shame wash over her, the weight of suspicion heavy on her shoulders. Akimbaba, the village healer, stepped forward, his expression grave and solemn. "Fatoumata, you must understand that returning from the dead is not normal. There are forces at play that we do not understand," he warned, his words sending chills down Fatoumata's spine. The gravity of her situation began to settle in, leaving her feeling both bewildered and terrified. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Fatoumata felt the weight of fear settle around her like a heavy cloak. Would the villagers accept her return, or would they see her as a threat, a harbinger of something sinister? Doubts clouded her mind as she stood in the center of the gathering, feeling vulnerable and exposed, caught between the worlds of the living and the unknown. Fatoumata tried to shake off her fears as she faced the villagers. She wanted to explain, to show them that she was still the same loving woman they had known. But deep down, she felt different, changed by her experience in the grave. Her heart raced as she struggled to find the right words. "Please, listen to me. I am still Fatoumata. I just want to live in peace," she pleaded, her voice trembling. But the whispers grew louder, doubt swirling around her like dark clouds. "Is she truly who she claims to be?" some murmured, their faces twisted with uncertainty. Dembayaro stood by her side, his eyes filled with determination. "She is my wife. We must believe in her." But even his voice, strong as it was, couldn't fully quell the growing unease among the villagers. Many still saw her as a symbol of bad luck, fearing what her return might bring. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Fatoumata felt the darkness creeping in, not just from the night but from the hearts of those around her. She turned to Dembayaro, desperation flooding her eyes. "What if they never accept me? What if they see me as a curse?" Dembayaro took her hands, squeezing them tightly, promising to stand by her side. Determined to prove herself, Fatoumata began to help her neighbors with their chores. She tended to their farms and played with the children, trying to show them that she was still the same Fatoumata they had loved. But even as she worked, she could sense their eyes watching her, filled with doubt and fear. One evening, while helping a neighbor, she overheard two villagers talking in hushed tones. "What if she brings trouble to our village? We should keep our distance," one said. Fatoumata's heart sank at the words, feeling more isolated than ever. Days passed, and Fatoumata continued to struggle with her new reality. Every time she looked at her hand, the missing finger was a painful reminder of the moment she returned to life. She felt incomplete, as though a piece of her soul had been left behind in the grave. Each time she reached out to help someone, she felt the sting of loss. Dembayaro noticed her sadness. "Are you okay, my love?" he asked gently, concern etched on his face. Fatoumata forced a smile, but inside, she felt a storm brewing. "I'm happy to be back, but I feel different. I don't know how to explain it," she confessed, tears filling her eyes. Dembayaro wrapped his arms around her, whispering soothing words, but Fatoumata still felt a growing chasm between her and the village. The villagers were slowly accepting her, yet whispers of doubt lingered in the air, making her feel like an outsider in her own home. She yearned for their trust, but knew it wouldn't come easily. At night, Fatoumata often lay awake, haunted by memories of the grave. Strange dreams filled her mind, shadows whispering secrets that danced just beyond her grasp. "What do they want from me?" she wondered, feeling a growing sense of dread with each passing night. One evening, while she was tending to her garden, she overheard a group of villagers discussing her in low tones. "What if she's not really alive? What if it's an illusion?" one said, his voice filled with suspicion. Fatoumata's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to tell them that she was real, that she had fought her way back. Dembayaro saw the turmoil within Fatoumata and felt helpless. He worried about her and the village. Each day, he watched her struggle, and it tore him apart. "I need to protect her from this darkness," he thought, determined to find a way to shield Fatoumata from the fears of the villagers. One night, after a long day of trying to prove her worth, Fatoumata sat alone, lost in thought. Dembayaro approached her, concern etched across his face. "What's troubling you, Fatoumata?" he asked gently. Fatoumata sighed deeply, feeling the weight of her emotions. I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope. One wrong step, and everything could fall apart, she confessed, her voice shaking. Dembayaro took her hand, squeezing it tightly. You're not alone in this. I will fight for you, always, he promised, but Fatoumata could sense the uncertainty in his tone. Days turned into weeks, and the villagers remained divided. Some were slowly beginning to accept Fatoumata, while others still whispered behind her back. The tension grew thick, and Fatoumata felt like a storm was brewing around her. She wanted to reach out, to heal the rifts between them, but every attempt seemed to backfire. One evening, during a village meeting, Fatoumata stood up, ready to speak. Please, I only want to help. I am still your Fatoumata, she called out, her voice filled with desperation. But the response was mixed, some nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads, filled with doubt. That night, Fatoumata lay awake, her heart heavy with uncertainty. What if I never truly belong again, she wondered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dembayaro held her close, trying to comfort her, but the darkness felt overwhelming. As the days turned into nights, Fatoumata began to experience strange dreams. Each time she closed her eyes, she was taken back to the grave, a place filled with shadows and whispers. Dark figures surrounded her, their faces obscured, their intentions unclear. In these dreams, she felt lost and alone, the weight of despair pressing down on her. One night, she dreamed that the shadows reached out to her, beckoning her to join them. What do you want from me? She cried out in fear. But they only whispered her name, echoing hauntingly in her ears. When she awoke, her heart raced, and sweat drenched her brow. Is this a warning? Fatoumata wondered, fear creeping into her heart. She felt as if the darkness was reaching out, trying to pull her back into the depths of despair. Each night, the dreams became more vivid, leaving her feeling exhausted and fearful. Dembayaro noticed her distress and approached her gently. Fatoumata, are you okay? You look troubled, he said, concern lining his face. Fatoumata took a deep breath, unsure if she should share her fears. I am having dreams, dark dreams that haunt me, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Dembayaro listened intently, his brow furrowed with worry. Maybe they are trying to tell you something, he suggested, wanting to help her find answers. But Fatoumata felt trapped in a web of uncertainty, unsure of what the dreams truly meant. Determined to find the truth, Fatoumata decided to seek guidance from a Kimbaba. She hoped he could help her understand the messages hidden in her dreams. The thought of facing her fears filled her with dread, but she knew she had to act. I must find the truth, she vowed, feeling a flicker of hope within her.